So in Seattle, Randy introduced me to a friend of his, Leslie, and she and I took this inland ferry up to Alaska, and he drove the station wagon from Seattle up through BC, and he was going to meet us in the Yukon. Skagway, I think, was where we were planning. Anyhow, Leslie and I and another friend we met on the ferry, a guy named Chuck, got off in Sitka, Alaska, to go for a few days hiking. And on the last day there, Chuck and I decided to climb this mountain, which was right behind our camp. It wasn't very tall, maybe 3,000 feet, but it was certainly the steepest climb I'd ever done. And I'd done lots of climbing, not with ropes, but freehand. And that was pretty good. It was pretty agile. Anyhow, we got up to the top. It took quite a few hours, and just grabbing roots and branches. And then at one point, we found on the side of this mountain, there was this graveyard of Sitka spruce, huge trees that covered the side, massive trees. So we hopscotched across those to get up one part of the mountain. But it just made me realize how enormous everything was there, because these trees were massive, and they were just like toothpicks on the side of the mountain. And I realized as we got higher, this was the steepest, hardest climb I'd ever been on, and that the mountain demanded a lot more respect than I had initially expected or thought. So we got up to the top. This was on June 25th, 1979, so right near the solstice, so the light was still quite bright, and it must have been about 8 o'clock at night by the time we got up there maybe at 7, and we spent an hour kind of walking around, and there was still snow on the top of the mountain, and there were from the top there, just other peaks all over the place. You could see them, and they were all steep. I could see, wow, we're on a really steep mountain. I could see it from the other mountains around us. I mean, we couldn't really even walk on the ridge. It was too steep to really move around. So we stayed up there for about an hour, and then we started heading down. Again, grabbing branches and toe holds wherever we could. And going down was much more difficult than going up, because we had to slow our descent. We were basically falling, and we had to grab objects to, like the mountain. We had to grab the mountainside to keep ourselves from falling too fast. And we were doing well until maybe halfway down or so. Felt like that. And then Chuck was over there, 100 yards or so, and getting down a creek bed, move quite fast. And I didn't realize this at the time. This is all later, but my competitive nature really kicked in then. Didn't want him to get too far ahead of me, so instead of doing a safe thing and going along the side of the mountain parallel to that creek and then down, I sort of wanted to do the hypotenuse of the triangle. Take the shortcut, and the shortcut was down a cliff, a rock face that was very steep. Had nothing to grab. But I thought, well, I'll just scoot down there and I'll meet him there. I didn't think of what if the surface were slippery or I slipped. I didn't think of that, and I didn't test the rock face before going down, putting all my weight on it, all my weight on my left foot. So I didn't test it, and I should have. And as I put my foot on it, it was slippery, and I was instantly on my bum, sliding, moving over this rock face. And I knew right away my life had changed, and I didn't know how. And my only options going over this rock face, and it just happened all of a sudden, boom, there I am falling off the side of a mountain. So the only options I could do were either stay on my bum and watch as I went over to see if I could stop myself somehow, or flip onto my belly and try to grab something as I went over the cliff. I just stayed on my belly, and I went over, moving pretty fast. And the next thing I had was my only out-of-body experience of my life, where I was maybe 100 feet away up and looking at myself. And I saw this little body just bouncing off rocks on its way down. And I just watched this for a number of seconds. I could see it bouncing. No thoughts, no feelings, just watching. And the next thing I knew, I was back in my body. I'd landed on a rock ledge. It wasn't any much wider than me, but my legs were straight out and my head was down between my knees and bleeding like a, stuck pig, as they say. And I thought I'd broken my back. All I could move was this. So I yelled to Chuck, yelled for help. And somehow he got over to me and laid me down, made a pillow out of his jacket, and then he took off for help. There's nothing else we could do. It was on this ledge. So as best to my knowledge, I laid there for about 2 hours, I think, while he had to climb down the rest of the mountain, jump in his truck and go to a pulp and paper mill and phone the Coast Guard. And they picked him up and then they came looking for me. And by this time it's about 11 at night and it's Alaska, so we're way up there, so it still looks like a twilight here. And during that time I realized later I was dying. My lungs were filling up with fluid slowly, but it was the most peaceful time I've ever had in my life. I'd say I've been more at peace in those 2 hours than I had been ever since or before. I was in no pain. I didn't know I was dying. I just know my friend had gone for help and I was really injured. Dying, or what the consequences of it, they weren't even there on my mind. And there was this massive Sitka spruce just towering above me, like a sentinel, almost sort of kind of keeping watch is what it felt like. And even the bugs were just hovering. They weren't biting me, so they were sort of my companions. And it felt so peaceful for those 2 hours or so. And I was drowning. So the last conscious memory I had was the Alaskan sky with the, well, first of all I heard a helicopter sound, and I just very dispassionately was, oh, it's over there. That's not where I am. And then my last thought, very dispassionate, well, they found me. And I couldn't have cared less, sort of. But then I passed out, and the rest, I never met Chuck again even, because he was moving to Alaska. But he told Leslie, and what they did, they had to lower a stretcher down because they couldn't land a helicopter and lift me onto it. And then they must have hauled the stretcher back into the helicopter and taken me down to the road and put me in an ambulance and right to the local hospital. And they probably figured out right away I'd broken my neck, and they did x-rays, I guess, of my neck, and they opened my tummy to see if I had any internal damages. I didn't, fortunately. What I had done is I had a massive bruise on my hip. I hit my hip on one of those rock outcroppings along the way, bouncing down, and it just must have done that to my neck. So my next conscious memory, well, the last one was the Alaskan sky with the helicopter, and my next one was I was looking up at the ceiling of an airplane, and I had, my head was in traction, and right away I knew that I broke my neck. Intuitively I knew that without having any experience or knowing anyone. I'd broken it as a 5/6 break, which is about where the bump is in the back of your neck. It's a common place to break. And the jet was taking me to Seattle because it was Alaska, America, so to Seattle, and they took me to a rehab hospital there, which dealt specifically in this ward, specifically with spinal cord injuries. And apparently they got lots from Alaska, people like me climbing. And I stayed there for 3 weeks till my neck stabilized. I wanted to go to Vancouver, but they wouldn't do that because I was too unstable.
Put your heart in every day. Well, they say you learn a lesson every day.